This is the Kia EV6, a car that since its launch has received its fair share of praise and plaudits, including from us. In fact, we think it's so good that we named it the AutoEV Car of the Year 2021. It's difficult to think that Kia, just 30 years ago, were making just a little rehashed Mazda 121 called the Pride. And now, here they are in 2022, bringing us something as sensational as the EV6. This car is Kia's future. It is designed from taking them from the humdrum to being a humdinger. Not unlike what the I-Pace did for Jaguar then. Because the I-Pace was unlike anything that we'd ever seen from Jaguar before. They stole a real march with this car. It was a sort of sporty, all-electric, crossover SUV, sports hatch style thing that up until recently I said would be my choice as a money no object EV if it was down to me. But of course the Jaguar brand is quite expensive. There's no getting away from that. In fact, to get into an I-Pace, you're looking really round about £70,000, unless you were to delve into the classifieds, because in terms of the rest of their abilities, these two cars are quite evenly matched in terms of size, in terms of power, in terms of battery size, in terms of range. So here's the question. What would you buy? Would you buy a brand new EV6 in its top of the line GT line S guys all-wheel drive? Or would you forsake that to buy a Jaguar I-Pace that's maybe a couple of years old and has a few thousand miles on the clock? Well, let's find out in the second of our new versus used twin tests. It's time to say a big warm welcome back to the Kia EV6, a warm welcome back to the Jaguar I-Pace, and of course, as always, welcome to AutoEV. So before we get started, our usual housekeeping rules apply. If you could be so kind, please remember to make sure that you're subscribed to the AutoEV channel. Make sure you press the little bell button down below as well, because that way you'll receive notification of when our next video goes live. And if you like the videos, make sure you do give them a thumbs up and leave us some comments. If you've been a supporter of the channel so far, thank you ever so much for being one. And if you haven't been and this you're new to us, stick around, see what we're like and maybe become one, because, well, every little bit helps, doesn't it? So what do we have here? Well, as I say, this is the Kia EV6, and it is, well, one of our favourite cars, as I mentioned in the beginning. It just blew our minds when we drove the car last year, taking the plaudit of the AutoEV Car of the Year 2021 away from such cars as the Hyundai Ioniq 5, Tesla Model Y, and even BMW's i4. We think this is a real sensational piece of kit. Now, as I say, pricing wise, it does start from round about the £43,000 mark, but the car we've got here is the GT Line S with all-wheel drive. And as we'll get on to later, in the performance and handling section, in terms of performance, it's very evenly matched with the I-Pace, such as, well, what's available to you through twin electric motors. But let's take a look at the Jaguar, which is this, an I-Pace HSE. Now, the I-Pace range is pretty simple to understand. There's only one sort of like power level, which is the 400 brake horsepower. But again, like I said with the Kia, we'll get on to that a little bit later. It comes in three trim levels, S, SE or HSE, which this car is here. Now, although this is a brand new press car, just for the sake of the test, we are going to be comparing a slightly older car in terms of specification and prices, and then obviously in terms of such things as servicing and warranty. We're going to cover that in the cost section, so stick around for that. But in terms of what's changed with the car since its launch back in 2018, there's not been a huge amount. It had a little midlife facelift back in 2020 with some updated infotainment system and some different options as well. But in terms of the way the car looks and the way it drives, what you see is pretty much what you've got for the last 4 years. So let's pitch the two of them together and see which one comes out on top. As always, we kick off with the styling. Two very handsome cars indeed, but we're going to start with the older statesman of the two, the Jaguar, which I think is still one of Ian Callum's best pieces of design. I think a true piece of design is something that you could launch now, many years after it was initially shown, and it still looks fresh and up to date. The BMW i3, for instance, is another one Phil thinks is a real design classic, and I think the I-Pace falls into that category as well. It's one of my favourite looking cars, never my favourite looking EVs. I think the thing looks sensational. As I say, it's one of Ian Callum's best designs, and he designed some of the prettiest Aston Martins that there ever were. The only thing I will add to that, however, is I don't like it in this specification. This flat red with the black wheels does it no favours whatsoever, in my opinion. So I'd probably avoid that. But just let's have a look at some of these details. This front grille, which is scooped out here to take the airflow here and then back out the bonnet and up over the top of the car. Absolutely sensational. These scowling headlamps that have become a real Jaguar signature. The air intakes down the side there that push airflow out round the side of these wheels as well. And it's this curve that I absolutely love that rises up over the top and then down, a real Coke bottle shape all the way out to the back, and a sweeping roofline. But it's in some of the details where I think the real design shows through, and the attention to those details that stands this car apart from lots of others, such as the humdrum EQC and the, well, questionable BMW iX. Now, this particular car, as I say, is an HSE specification, which gets the 20-inch alloys as standard. If you go for the base S, then it'll be 19s, and the SE and the HSE get 20s, but the option to move up to 21. So do check the options out. Let's say when you're looking at a pre-owned I-Pace, because there are a few, and we will cover some of them in this, but not all of them, so just be careful with that. This is the bit I'm talking about down here, this kind of line that kind of comes up here, because that then is mirrored by the sort of like the rear roof spoiler and then the rear tail lights, and it's that little attention to detail, that same kind of line, that same little, this bit here as it kind of goes down here, how sharp it is and how kick it is, and then this sculpted bit here, as I say, you can see that mirrored all around the car, and I just think the whole thing just looks absolutely brilliant. Like the Kia, it's got the pop-out door handles, so, and you've got the key, you just press them. They're a little bit better because they've got the whole handle that you pull rather than just the flick out blades that the EV6 has. And as I say, this lovely long roof that you get here into this big high tail spoiler, and then this sloping back. Just an absolute incredible looking car, I think. Hasn't dated a bit. And here's that bit I was talking about down the side. You see how the spoiler just kind of comes up at the side and then goes back down again, and the same with the lights, how they've got these kind of in and out. That's mirrored, as I say, on that little bit of trim down the side. Just real thought has gone into the design of the I-Pace, I think. Like the front, where the airflow comes up over the bonnet, the spoiler take the airflow back down over the rear screen. You've got this tiny little kind of lip spoiler here that's standard on them all. This one's got a black pack fitted, so all the Jaguar badging's all blacked out on it. As I say, it's not my cup of tea, but I suppose people do like it. Big diffuser at the bottom there. Just a sensational looking car, absolutely sensational. But let's get the key in now and let's have a look at that and see how that compares. Well, again, like the Jaguar, just a great piece of design. I love these headlights, the kind of slashes that are in the daytime running lights, and this traditional sort of like Kia style. This is what they call the digital Tiger nose. Now, I've never seen a digital Tiger, but allegedly that's what its nose looks like, so well done Kia for emulating that. You've got these kind of nice jutting out kind of chin spoiler here as well, and again, like the I-Pace, you've got this really nice kind of curving short kind of bonnet that just curves up over the top of the rear wheels. But it's this line here that I love, where the line just kind of from the headlamp just sweeps back into the top of the wheel arch. Again, really thoughtful piece of design. It's been well executed, and it's not some of the hash and the mess that you see coming from some of the premium German brands at the moment. And like the Jaguar, 20-inch alloy wheels. I think it's 19s that are standard on the Air model, which is the base car, and then the GT line and GT line S that this is gets the 20s. Now there's going to be a GT model, rather confusingly, which is a high performance variant that's coming out with a scarcely believable 577 brake horsepower, but that's for another day. But irrespective of what model you choose, the trim level, they all look like this, so they all look absolutely brilliant. Now, going further down, again, this bit here I really like as well, this kind of visor graphic as they call it. So you've got the painted A-pillar here and the blacked out mirror as well, so it gives the roof that kind of floating look, and it all kind of pinches in at the back which is nice. And as I say, it reminds me, as I said in my original road test, of the Nissan Skyline, the R35 Skyline, that's got that kind of, I don't know, it's just got that kind of almost fighter jet helmet look to it. And then this floating rear roof spoiler at the back with a little puddle lights in it. Brilliant. I'm not so keen on these, as I say, these flip out door handles. They're not as nice as the Jaguars. They feel just a little bit cheaper than the Jags do, but they're okay, they're fine. This line here is another one I love, the way it kind of swoops up at the back here and then continues after the wheel arch into this, which then continues around the back as the spoiler, which I'll now show you. And here's what I mean, this lovely kind of blade that just sweeps right across the back there, and you've got high level brake lighting set in it, and then your kind of other lights down the side there, indicators down in there. Your reversing lamp is this kind of checker plate design down at the bottom of that diffuser, which is, I think, really cool. I really like that. Big Kia logo in the back stating the intent, we're here to stay and this is us, we're serious now. Concave kind of panel there, and a nice little bit of chrome trim across the back. Absolutely sensational. However, I've got a bit of a problem with both of these cars because the I-Pace suffers from it too. No rear wiper. Now I get what the aerodynamicists are going to say, because they say, well, the airflow coming over the car is designed to then take all the water off this rear screen, and you don't need it. You don't need anything interrupting the lovely lines of our car. That's fine, and I get that, because it's 70 mile an hour on the M1. That's brilliant. What happens when you're reversing out your driveway on a frosty morning? And for those of you who say, but you've got a rear camera, both the cars have them down there, exactly where all the dirt gets kicked up from. Look, come on guys, let's be practical about it. Fit a rear wiper, eh? Otherwise, the first thing you have to do when you buy either of these cars is get yourself down to Halfords and buy some Rain-X. That's the only way you're going to cure it. Which one's best? Well, for me personally, I'm going to give victory to the I-Pace. I think the car just looks absolutely sensational. It's one of my favourite looking cars, and as I say, it's the best Jaguar I've done since the E-Type, and it's one of the best designs Ian Callum has ever come up with. But the Kia does run at a very, very close second for me. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments down below. Now, as I say, both cars are very, very similar in actual size. In fact, the Kia is just a few centimetres longer than the Jaguar, but it's the Jaguar that actually takes the spoils when it comes to practicality with a bigger boot. Now, both cars are built on dedicated EV platforms, so they're not hampered by the constraints that you sometimes get by converting a conventional piston engine car into an EV. But as I say, it's the Jaguar that takes the spoils, with 557 litres in here as opposed to the 490 of the Kia. The only thing I will add to that is that drops by 10 litres on the Kia if you have the bigger audio system like fitted to this car, so just bear that in mind. 557 litres, which will extend out to 1,436 litres in the Jaguar by dropping the 60-40 split rear seat, or 1,300 litres by doing it in the Kia. But both cars do still pass the AutoEV suitcase test. As you can see, we got all 4 suitcases in. Where the Jaguar also wins slightly is it does have some dedicated underfloor storage that you can get your cables into, whereas in the Kia, it doesn't, oddly enough. You have got some little tray underneath the boot floor here, but you can't really get these cable bags into it, as I say. They don't fit, so that's a bit odd, but they do come in the bags. Now, the Jaguar's got the hard parcel shelf, the Kia's got the kind of roller blind here. Where the Kia does one a little bit, however, is handily from the boot, you can actually drop the rear seats, whereas in the Jaguar you've got to go into the car, and with the Kia you get a relatively nice flat load through. So in terms of overall space, it is the Jag that's slightly ahead, but it's not as big a difference as you might imagine. And both of them also counter as well by having some space under the front bonnet, which we'll take a look at. Now with the Kia, it's here. Now, a little bit of a caveat with this. This is an all-wheel drive car, so dual motor. So because you've got the motor at the front, the space available in here is something reasonable. I think it's about 24 litres. So it's not huge, but again, it may take one of those cables. You know, one of your cables might sort of like live in here, so that's ideal, but it's not going to take like a big rucksack and an extra bag. However, if you go for a single motor car, it's rear-wheel drive, which means this space opens up to about a more palatable 50 litres. whereas all Jaguars are all-wheel drive. So again, it's not massive, but it'd be enough to put maybe sort of like cables or a small rucksack or small camera bag if you're carrying one. So it's slightly more practical in the Jaguar than it is in an all-wheel drive Kia. So, rear seat space in the Jaguar. Well, it's okay actually, it's absolutely fine. The seat's set up for my driving position. Now this car has the optional sports performance seats, so they are slightly slimmer in the backrest than the standard sports seats. So just be aware of that, but I don't think there's a massive load of difference, and I've been in a car with the standard seats and it's absolutely fine. It's a little bit tighter, I would say, to slide your feet underneath the driver's seat, but again, I like my driver's seat set quite low down, so there's probably a bit more scope to have more foot space there if you have a slightly more raised driving position. But in terms of leg space, absolutely fine. Headroom, well, I'm okay. As I say, I'm 5'7", maybe 5'8" on a good day. But there's still a feeling of space back here. It's okay. It doesn't feel quite so wide, maybe something like an Audi e-tron with which it sort of competes, or the BMW iX certainly has a lot more lounging space, but you know, obviously it's a lot more money. There's not quite a flat floor, but it's not enough of a rise that would actually sort of like properly hurt someone that was sitting in the middle. They could still get their feet in there. We've got a couple of USB-C ports there, heated rear seats on this car, 12-volt charging socket, and there's a tiny little bit of storage there. Mat pockets on the backs of the front seats, tiny door bins. That's the only thing I would say. You're not going to be getting much in there. But you do have the flip down armrest with the cup holders in it as well, so if it's just two people in the back, it's absolutely fine. Isofix points, well, they're nice and easy to get to. They've just got the covers that you just pull off and slot the seats in, and the two outer seats, they're a bit more shaped to sort of like take people, right, and that centre one is a bit flat. So for four, absolutely perfect. I'd say there's no real issues at all. Even if you have a car with the glass roof, because it doesn't open, actually headroom isn't going to be impeded into at all by having that. But again, depending obviously on specification, if you're looking at a pre-owned car, just check it out before you do. But I don't see there's a massive load of problem back here for certainly a family of four. Now, jumping straight into the Kia, how do we feel? Well, the first thing you notice is the floor is pushed up a little bit more. I tend to sit more with my legs up, and again, a similar type of problem where you don't have enough sort of like foot room to kind of squeeze your foot underneath if the driver in front of you has a lower driving position. But in terms of the rest of it, in terms of leg room, it's absolutely fine. Headroom, probably very, very similar to the Jaguar. This car does have a sunroof fitted, but because of the kind of darker headline, it feels a little bit more enclosed. What I would say is there is a flat floor across the back, however. So the person sitting in the middle, it feels like you would actually get three abreast here for, you know, certainly for a short journey, and the middle person would be quite comfortable. There wouldn't be a problem because the seat, the bench itself feels quite flat. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. As I say, it isn't sculpted to kind of take your bum like the I-Pace is. What else? The only thing, again, there's two USB ports here. They're on the backs of the front seats here. This is the only bit I always find a little bit disappointing with the Kia. The rest of the cabin quality is sensational, but the backs of the seats, they've got this kind of hard kind of plastic on them, and it just doesn't feel particularly nice. It's quite handy having the kind of handle there for getting in and out, but see, it just doesn't feel particularly good. And I think from here, it always reminds me of looking at it, it's kind of shaped like E.T.'s head. Anyway, pockets, yep, rigid pockets at the back here, but same as with the I-Pace, tiny, tiny door bins. I mean, they would fit a very small water bottle, but that's about it. There's nothing there in terms of that. You've got the fold-down armrest like you've got with the I-Pace, and again, you've got a couple of cup holders, or you can slide it back and just have an empty tray, which is quite handy. There is also a little load-through hatch into the boot as well, which again could be quite handy if you're taking things, I don't know, like fishing rods or whatever, and you need the extra bit of space. So in terms of how both cars perform practically, it's pretty much even Stevens, where one wins like the Jaguar and having the bigger boot. The Kia sort of wins by sort of feeling a bit more like it's a bit wider and you get more like 3 across. They're very even in terms of headroom and leg space, tiny little bit more footroom in the Jaguar, but again, not a completely flat floor. So let's call it a draw. So what have we got up front? Well, they're very, very different cars. And we'll start with the Jaguar because I say this is going to be the used car that you could potentially be looking at. Now, there was a slight facelift in 2020 where Jaguar updated their infotainment system. Now, it's fair to say that from launch in 2018 up till that facelifted car, the infotainment system was probably the biggest cause of criticism for the interior and the quality of it. I was speaking to a friend of mine who owned an I-Pace for a couple of years, and he said in the time he had the car, you know, the only thing that really caused them any problems was a really glitchy infotainment system, and his was the pre-PIVI Pro, which is what this particular car has, which I'll go on to in a second. I said otherwise, in terms of quality, in terms of the way the car behaved, bar a couple of tiny little things, he said it was absolutely perfect. So just be aware of that, and if you go on to some of the forums and you look at and you talk to some of the people, I'm sure it will be exactly the same. The earlier infotainment system wasn't the best. Our original test car that we had a couple of years ago was before the facelift, and I know that when we had that there was a couple of glitches that we had in that. And if you haven't seen that road test and you want to see a slightly younger looking me before I got even more slicker and even more professional, we'll pop a link up above. Otherwise, what do you have? Well, you're pretty much looking at the same dashboard you would be looking at in a 2018 car, and that is to say one that I think stands head and shoulders above an awful lot of cars out there. The first thing about it is that I love is this kind of soft material that the upper dash comes in, this kind of spongy kind of rubber on this side, and then this kind of leather over here. It's really slick. I love this little kind of 3-spoke steering wheel. Again, round, thank the Lord, just a lovely, neat, nice girth, nicely designed, just enough buttons on it. It looks sporty, it feels sporty. It is sporty. I love that. This is the PIVI Pro system, which saw first came out on the Land Rover Defender, and now it's been sort of like fitted onto all the other kind of Jaguar Land Rover products. It's okay. You also get standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto now, and the optional wireless charging pad, which is in here, which you don't get in some of the older cars. But yeah, this PIVI Pro system, it's all right. It's still not perfect, I would suggest. It's still a little bit, it's a tiny little bit laggy. It's not the best. There are better systems out there. You know, BMW, Audi, Mercedes systems are slightly better than this. But as I say, from what we've heard and from speaking to owners of the car, it is a lot better than the earlier system. So as I say, that came out in 2020 in that slightly updated car. The other thing that happened in that facelift, there was another little kind of little trim differences. I think they put a bit more chrome on it, and you can option up a black pack. But it also meant you could also get over-the-air software updates for the maps and the software of the car. So to update it, you don't have to go to the dealers. It's all done over the air. So again, check that out. Make sure if you're looking at a pre-owned car, is it a pre-2020 facelift or is it the 2020 facelift car? If it's registered in that year, don't necessarily think that it is the facelifted car, so make sure you do check that. What else? Well, you've got 3 screens in the car. So you've got your infotainment screen here, and then again, depending on the specification, will depend on whether you've not got this screen here, which is the climate control. And again, it's okay, it's not perfect. You get a little bit of glare off it. The last car that I drove, last I-Pace I had, didn't have this, and it just had the buttons, which is a little bit better in fairness. You don't get the glare off it. Few people have criticised these rotary dials here, but I really like them. Now, it depends obviously on what function you want, what you do with them, and it's written here. So if you just want to change the temperature, you just turn it, and it does that. And it's got a really nice click feel to it, like the bezel on a nice diver's watch. But if you want to change the fan speed, what you have to do is you pull it up and then turn it, and the fan speed increases or decreases. If you push it, it then is the seat control. So again, depending obviously on whether you've got heated seats, which this one does, that heightens them up, or ventilated seats, which again this car has, that will get the ventilation going. I quite like that. It's all grouped on one control and it's quite nice and easy to use. I don't see what the problem is with that. There we go. Buttons down here. You've got your cruise control, the mode that you go into. Now the I-Pace has air suspension as standard, and you can raise and lower it. So there is a little bit of, dare I suggest, off-road capability with the I-Pace. So you can raise the car's ride height up if you're going over sort of like more rutted ground or a kind of rutted lane or something, or even just to let people that have got limited mobility in and out of the car, which is quite nice. And obviously it'll hunker down at speed as well, just to get a bit more aero and a bit more kind of dynamics. As I say, there's no wireless charging pad, which is in there. Storage is okay, a little kind of pen tray here, a couple of cup holders here, which have got weird kind of rubber balloons on the side to grip your cup. You've got this armrest back here with a USB-A, I think it is, and a USB-C and a 12-volt socket and a little tray in there. That's all right. Again, quite small door bins. They're all right, they go back, but they're not easy to kind of get in and out of. The driving position is excellent, however. Now, as I say, these are the sports performance seats, like with the one-piece backrest, and they just hug you, and they hug you in the right place, and it feels like you're in charge of something that's got high performance in it, without, as I say, pinching you and making you feel uncomfortable. There's good under-thigh support. They're electrically adjustable, as I say, on this car. They're heated and ventilated. Manually adjustable steering column, so you get reach and rake adjustment, and then you've got, as I say, just the right amount of controls on the steering wheel for you. So heated steering wheel, which is fitted to this car, cruise control, lane guide assist, and then on this side is your media controls and Bluetooth, so nice and simple. Standard kind of column stocks, which have a nice kind of quality feel to them, and then down in here there's a few other little buttons. So there's the bonnet release, the boot release, and the electronic park brake. All in all, I think it's a great interior. I love it. It kind of really kind of envelopes you, it wraps around you, it makes you feel, as I say, you're in a kind of sportier driving car. This particular car also has the, I think it's called Clear Sight rear view mirror, where it uses a camera. That was seen on the Range Rover Evoque, and again that became an option as part of the 2020 facelift, so just watch out for that. It's all right. It's actually better than the one I've just been using, the Toyota Mirai, which was a dreadful thing. I didn't mention it in the test of that because it was so disappointing. This one's got equipped with a Meridian surround sound audio system as well, so again, if you're looking at a pre-owned car, check the options that are available, make sure you've got the right spec that you're looking for. But on the whole, as a car, I absolutely love this. The environment is brilliant. It has a quality feel to it. As I say, the only maybe glitch that I would suggest just be careful of is that infotainment system. But in terms of the rest of it, the quality of it, the way it stands up to the test of time, the way it feels, the way it makes you feel when you're inside it, it's a quality bit of kit, this. Well, there's nothing really that hasn't been said before about the interior of the EV6 from our initial road test, because it's still a relatively new car. There's been no changes to it, which is to say good. But it's time maybe just for a little recap. We'll go over it. But as I say, if you haven't seen the original road test we did of the EV6, we'll pop a link up there so you can go and have a look at it. Okay, so initial impressions when you get in it. Really, really classy. Really, really classy. I like this interior an awful lot. There is a lot to recommend it. So you get this lovely big display up here, this kind of curved screen with the two screens where you've got infotainment, navigation and such forth there, and then your driver display here. Now, the only issue that I had with it, there's two small problems I have with the EV6. The first thing is, I've got the seat all the way down, and I still feel quite close to the roof. Now, a friend of mine who drives a Kia e-Niro, and who's well over 6 foot, sat in the car the other day. He loves the EV6, and even he thought, oh, actually that's quite tight for him. So check that out if you are, of taller stature. Make sure you check it out. The other thing is, when I've got the it was like the Ioniq 5, it uses the same digital display. When I've got in my driving position and I'm sitting here like this, the speedo's just masked by the edge of the steering wheel here, as is the range, and then I got all this information here that's not quite as important. Now, that I'm really splitting hairs here because there's a head-up display with the speed on it, which I can see. But it'd be quite nice where you could configure that a little bit better. where that speed maybe is brought into the middle, like you can on, you know, things like the Audi Q4 e-tron. Even my own personal Jeep Grand Cherokee, you can tailor the screen a lot better than you can with this. But that's it. That's my only two kind of bugbears with the driving position of the EV6. If you're tall, you do sit very close to the roof lining, and just the way the steering wheel cuts off that speedo there. That's it. Otherwise, what have we got? Well, we've got a nice two-spoke, very elegant kind of two-spoke steering wheel, which again, like the Jaguar, has just the right amount of controls on it. There's not too much here. It's things for controlling media, which is on the right in this car, and then the lane keep assist and cruise control and such like driver assistance is on the left side. You've got your drive mode button down here, so for medium, normal and sport, usual stuff. We'll go on to that when we're out driving the cars. You can change the functionality there. This here is I quite like this. This is really quite nice, this little switch bank here. They're touch sensitive and they don't have any haptic feedback on them. But what you have is depending obviously on what you want. So in other words, at the moment we've got the heating and ventilation controls on display here. But if you press this once, it then goes to your media setup. So it's a little screen. And then it just, as I say, it switches between the two depending obviously on what you want. Now it is a little bit fiddly on the move, I will say that, you know, to go on to it. And you've got to remember what each control does. So because every time you change it, even these two rotary dials at the edge there, they go from being volume and stuff to being temperature. So just be careful with that if you're using it. But yeah, it's nice. It's quite neatly integrated. It's physical buttons without having physical buttons, which is meaning you don't have to go into the screen to adjust things like your aircon and stuff like that. Standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, obviously, but the Kia system itself is pretty decent. It's actually okay, and I'd say it is better than even the new Jaguar system, the Pivi Pro. It is very, very good system. I like it. You know, it's quite quick to react. There's a lot of information that you can get in there, you know, so you can sit and you can set everything else up. The home screen's nice and easy to get to. It's a little bit more of a stretch away if you have a slightly more reclined driving position than the Jaguars, which is a little bit easier. It's a bit more kind of here, so it's a little bit more of a stretch, but you know, again, splitting hairs on that. This floating console area, very good. There's a lot more storage in the Kia than there is in the Jaguar. You've got big cup holder up here, another one here, centre arm, really deep bin in here for the centre armrest, a wireless charging pad which is within nice and easy reach, and then this massive big storage bin underneath this big floating console. This doesn't move like it does in the Ioniq 5. It stays where it is, but it's fine, and everything's angled towards you as the driver, and I really like that. Your EV start button, you've got ventilated seats in this model, heated seats, heated steering wheel, and all those buttons are there. So that's quite nice and easy to use. USB A and C charging ports down there if you do need them. The door bins are a lot better underlined as well. Thank you, Kia. That's nice, so things don't rattle around. And then the kind of ancillary buttons around here, they all kind of work nice and easy. Everything's labelled well. You know what it is. Boot release, electric park brake, the release for the charging flaps there, and then all your mirror and window switches controls there. So yeah, there's very little to actually find fault here with. The materials that Kia have used as well is worthy of note. I really like them. The design of the dashboard, it feels nice. It feels kind of soft touch on this kind of upper bit here with this kind of almost kind of textured rubberized area here. These really slim vents that run across the dash, nice. The seats themselves, comfortable. They're not as supportive in terms of the performance seats of the Jaguar, but you know, again, that's on that particular car. So in terms of the standard seats that would be on the Jaguar, they're probably very, very similar. These ones have got the GT line S, has got this kind of almost suede-like material with, they call it vegan leather inserts. I mean, let's be honest, it's vinyl. It's no vegan leather. If it's man-made, it's called vinyl, along the sides of it. But again, it's nice, and I like seeing a slightly different material being used in the car rather than ubiquitous leather. So hats off to you, Kia. So, summary, what do we think? Well, in terms of the way it looks, in terms of the way it makes you feel, I'd go Jaguar. In terms of practicality, you'd go Kia. So in many ways, up until now, the cars have been fairly evenly matched. And even as we move into this sector of our test, usability, when we talk about battery size and range, again, they're fairly evenly matched, up to a point. Now the Kia, although it's based on the eGMP platform that it shares with the Hyundai Ioniq 5, only comes in the one battery size, which is a 77 kilowatt hour battery. And depending obviously on whether it's a single motor car or whether it's the dual motor car will depend on the range you get. So a single motor car will deliver a WLTP figure of around about 329 miles, whereas the dual motor car on the bigger 20-inch alloys that we have, that figure drops to 300 miles. Now the Jaguar has a 90 kilowatt hour battery, and that should deliver a WLTP figure range of 292 miles. So, as I say, pretty much even Stevens. Until it comes to charging, and that's where the Kia gets the advantage. You see, this architecture that Kia and Hyundai have come up with will take charging speeds of up to 350 kilowatts, whereas the Jaguar is pegged at 100 kilowatts. Charging the Kia from 10 to 80% from a 150 kilowatt charger will take just 18 minutes, whereas a 10 to 80% charge in a Jaguar from a 100 kilowatt charger is slightly more at 44 minutes. Now if you stumble across the more likely 50 kilowatt chargers that tend to be at petrol stations and supermarkets, then they roughly even out again. That 10 to 80% charge is going to take around about an hour and 15 minutes from either car. But charging from your 7 kilowatt wall box from home, the Kia is much faster at around about 7 hours 20 minutes, whereas it's almost 13 hours for the Jaguar. However, what Jaguar did back in that 2020 facelift is that they fitted it with the 3-phase 11 kilowatt onboard charger. So if it's a bigger, more powerful wall box you have at home, then obviously that will charge a lot less in time than it does from a 7 kilowatt wall box. But in terms of the cars, we give victory to the Kia because not only is it a much more, is it capable of taking much faster charging speeds, but it also runs an 800 volt architecture, which means the battery is more efficient and it cools easier. And also as well, it comes with a vehicle to load socket as well, meaning you can charge external sources as well from the car. So in this sector, it is a decisive victory to the Kia. Now the I-Pace has 400 brake horsepower, irrespective of which model you go for, whether it's S, SE or HSE. So that's the level of power that you have. It's almost got an almost perfect 50-50 weight distribution as well, which is what Jaguar set up, and you can feel that in the car. It is a much more dynamic car than the Kia to drive. Now don't get me wrong, that's not hard edged. Don't be taken by these kind of light or what looks like lightweight seats and me talking like that. It can be a very, very smooth, very comfortable and very refined car. It's a Jaguar after all, and their whole mantra used to be grace, space and pace, and I think genuinely that it doesn't apply to much cars better than it does to the I-Pace. This is a phenomenal car, it really is. Now you've got different driving modes which you activate down here: normal, eco and dynamic. And when you put it into dynamic mode, gosh, you do feel the difference. The standard suspension is an air suspension. It all kind of hunkers itself down. It drops itself at much higher speed to aid with aero as well. But it's not uncomfortable in any way, shape or form. It's still got that almost kind of magic carpet ride that you get from a Jaguar and you expect from a Jaguar. Also as well, when you're up at kind of motorway speeds, the refinement you get is exceptional. There's a tiny little bit of wind noise, a little bit more than you get from the Kia, but not much. There's certainly not a lot of road roar from these 20-inch wheels. You don't notice the fact that they're 20s at all, nor do you notice it in terms of its ride comfort either. It is superb from that point of view. So yeah, the Jaguar just seems to tick every single box for me, what I look for in a car. For when I'm in the mood for it, it can really pick up its skirts and go. When I'm not, it turns into this kind of soft, comfortable, refined car with enough space for the family and the dog and all your accoutrements that you want to take with you. So it just seems to be that car that ticks every single box. Driving position is excellent. As I say, this car's got the lightweight seat, the performance seats, but as I say, I've driven it with the standard sports seats. you wouldn't be missing out by not having these performance seats. The standard ones are really comfortable and just as nice. They hold you in just the right place. There's a little bit more of a kind of firm back support on these ones, which I quite like. And as I say, there's a bit more kind of shoulder support around the edges of it. But as I say, you're not going to be missing out if the car you're looking at doesn't have them, so don't worry about that. The driving position itself is excellent. As I say, I've got a long enough squab. It supports me underneath the thighs. The wheel adjusts for reach and for rake, so you get yourself into a good position. There is a very, very good visibility. There's great visibility around about the car. Your rear three quarters is probably the only little bit, just because of that kind of narrower rear window, or rear side window where it narrows at the rear pillar. That's the only thing I would say. Just that over the shoulder is a tiny, tiny little bit less than ideal. You don't get as much tech as you do in the Kia in terms of the blind spot monitoring that you get with the Kia where it comes up on the screen here. You do still have a lot of safety systems on the car, as I say, your lane keep assist, your autonomous braking, your radar, cruise control, all that is still there, so don't worry about that. It's just those last little bits of tech where the Kia is just that little bit better, if that's the kind of thing that you're really into. For me, it's not the be all and end all. I'd rather have a car that I really like to get in and drive. The steering is really nicely weighted. They've judged it really well. You know, the way that the car just pitches into a corner, there's a good weight behind the steering. You know exactly where it's pointing. It's not quite as, and it doesn't feel as heavy. The whole car doesn't feel as heavy as, say, something like the BMW iX or the Mercedes EQC or even the Audi e-tron. It feels, you know, sort of like almost kind of light of foot, this car. And that's what I said back in my original road test of it. It's difficult to think of the I-Pace as a big kind of SUV. It feels a bit more like almost a kind of dynamic sports hatch. And as I say, the car it always kind of reminded me of a little bit was like a really comfortable Subaru Impreza Turbo without the kind of flat four warble, because it really feels that kind of dynamic. It really feels that you could string a set of twisties together and the car would just eat them up, no problem at all. So yeah, from the point of view of the drivability of the car, of the cars, the Jaguar is the more fun to drive, and it's certainly the more dynamic of the two. It's interesting because it's not that the Kia is in any way inferior, because it isn't. It's a brilliant car. It's just that the Jaguar is so good. It really is an exceptional piece of kit, this. I love it. I absolutely love this car. I think it's an absolute blinder. So, EV6 GT Line S all-wheel drive. What have we got? Well, dual motors, one at the front, one at the back, and delivering 326 brake horsepower, which is well enough, I would suggest. It makes a 0 to 60 time of 5.3 seconds, which is more than adequate for any car of this sort of stature. But it's an interesting thing, because although the Jaguar is more powerful and yes, it's faster and things, there's a real, and they are very similar in a lot of ways, but there's a real different feel to the way that they go about the performance. Now, my wife has driven them both. In fact, she almost had an I-Pace for a company car a little while back. And a very interesting scenario, she drove both the cars this week, and she summed it up in a really interesting way. She said the Kia was a really smooth performer. The way it went about its business is very smooth. She said you wouldn't be frightened of it. You could get in it, and almost anybody could get in it and drive it really, really well. It's very quiet, it's very refined, and it goes about its business in a really pleasant way. She said the Jaguar feels a bit more meaty, and that's, I think, a really great way of summing it up. And that's exactly it. I can't think of a better way of putting it. The Kia's smoothness, the way it just goes about delivering its performance is really nice. You just get in it and everything just feels easy. Not easy as in light and airy and stuff like that. It just feels an easy car to get on with and an easy car to get the performance out of. The Jaguar makes you work a little bit harder. But let's focus a little bit on the EV6 for a second. Now, as I said, we've driven the car before, we've done a big road test on it, so I won't labour too much on this part of the road test. But let's just recap. It drives really, really well. It's got a nice feel to the car. The steering's got a lovely weight to it. The way the chassis just sets itself up for a bend is nice. The ride quality is very, very good. Sorry, that's the lane keep assist just coming in there. The ride quality is very, very good. It acquits itself well. There's an even balance in terms of the feel for the car. It doesn't feel nose heavy. It doesn't feel like the back might slip out on you any time. So there's a really nice balance to the way the EV6 goes about delivering its performance. The brakes are good. The brakes are excellent. You've got different levels of regeneration, which are done via the two paddles behind the steering wheel. So you can ramp up the regen quite a bit, so it's quite aggressive, or you can dial it right back so that when you're on open road and it coasts away, and again, nice and easy to use. Visibility is very, very good. What you do have with the EV6, and you've got it in the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and I've noticed the Tesla now do it as well now. When you put your indicator on, you get the little blind spot camera on that side. So if I've turned left there, I now get a little graphic, a little image showing me what's on my left hand side down the side of the car. Really clever. So especially on days where you've got cyclists out and about, you can just see if you've just passed one, whereabouts they are. So that's a really nice little safety feature. And of course there is the dearth of safety features with the car. As I said, lane keep assist, autonomous braking, all that sort of malarkey that you can have. I think that's pretty much a given these days with the EVs. But I go back to what I always say with Kia, where they differ from Hyundai, they're sort of like their partner brand, is they're much more refined. I find them a lot quieter, a lot nicer in terms of road noise and wind noise. They just seem a lot smoother and a lot quieter, and I think that's a real plaudit to have. It always really impressed me with the Nero, how refined that car was, and the EV6 is again building on that. So that's phenomenal. Driving modes. Yep, you've got different driving modes, and that's done via the button on the steering wheel, very Porsche-like, where you can just choose what driving mode you want in. So you go from normal to sport, and the response on the throttle when you're in sport is quite something. You really, in some cars, there's sometimes not much of a difference between the normal and the sport mode. Not in the EV6. When you put it in sport, the alacrity of the throttle response is quite something. It really can take you quite by surprise. You've got to be careful with it. But it's an immediate response. That slug of torque that you get from the two motors, it just slingshots the EV6 down the road at such a rate. It's wonderful. As I say, it's a real driver's car. Sorry, it's a bit of a width restriction here. It's a real driver's car, the EV6 as well. So, as I say, as much as you want to kind of dial it back and just use it as this nice kind of smooth, easy family car, you can do. Just leave it normal mode. But if you want to get a hustle on, get it into the sport mode. Take it by the scruff of the neck and really use it. But I'll leave it with Lizzie's summary. It's less meaty than the Jaguar, whatever that means. Meaty. So the Kia EV6 GT Line S all-wheel drive retails at £52,695. That price is correct at time of filming. But as I said, if you were to delve into the classifieds, what I-Pace would you get for similar money? Well, you'd get an HSE specification, just like this car, and it would probably be somewhere in the region of 2 years old, maybe sort of like 15 to 20,000 miles. So hardly an old car. It's certainly well worth looking out, but of course there's more to it than just buying the car. And that's what we want to talk about a little bit when it comes down to the cost. Now, where the Kia really does win is you get a 7-year, 100,000 mile warranty with every new Kia, which is phenomenal. With a Jaguar, it's just a 3-year warranty. And obviously, if it's a used car you're looking at, then that warranty may be about to expire, depending on the age of car you're looking at. So that's one thing to consider. The second thing is in terms of servicing. But fairness, they're evenly matched here because both cars require a service every 2 years or 21,000 miles. But bear in mind, as I say, if it's a used Jaguar you're looking at and it's coming from maybe a non-franchise dealership, you may be in line for a service within your first year of ownership, depending obviously when it last had that service. But here's the thing, it's worth checking this out because at the moment, Jaguar are doing quite a deal on approved used I-Paces. And it just applies to the I-Pace, where they will make sure it has a minimum of a 24-month warranty, which also includes roadside assistance. They're also chucking in a free wall box and installation, plus a year's subscription to BP Pulse charging infrastructure. On top of that, they're also making sure that the car's next service for you will be free of charge, and they're putting in quite a bit of cash in terms of a deposit contribution if you take out a finance package. So the key is here, make sure that you do shop around, make sure you read all the fine print when it comes to the used car, because there are some deals out there, and that deal that Jaguar are doing at the moment, well, that's worth quite a bit of money. So it's not quite as clear cut as it might seem on the surface. So in terms of competition, what could you else be looking at? Well, we've kind of opened the floodgates up here with this sort of new versus used scenario, because 50 to 55,000 pounds, well, that's quite a bit of money, and that does buy you an awful lot of cars. But if you were sticking down the new car side, what could you consider? Well, there's things such as obviously the Hyundai Ioniq 5, Audi's Q4 e-tron, Volkswagen's ID4, Skoda's Enyaq, Tesla Model Y, yada yada yada. It's literally endless. If you went down the used route, however, Audi's e-tron, the big e-tron, is now down at this sort of area as well. And if you weren't frightened off by a bigger mileage, then you could also be looking at something like a Tesla Model X with between 50 and 60,000 miles on it. Also, BMW's rather excellent iX3, although it's just recently launched last year, that is now starting to creep down into this area for the very first cars that were in market. So X-demos are cars that maybe have done a few thousand miles. But the key is, you do have quite a choice. Now, if you want to know what car is worth considering, then make sure after this video you stick on the AutoEV YouTube channel and check out some of our road test reviews, because we've pretty much reviewed most of those cars that I've just mentioned. So stick with us and have a look through the back catalogue to find out what we would recommend. So, to recap, here's what we like about the Kia EV6. We like its design, its range, efficiency and charging capabilities, its interior practicality, and its performance and handling. We don't like the heat pump is an option, the boot space isn't quite as big and practical as the Jaguars, some of the minor controls are difficult to use on the move, but not a lot else. And here's what we don't like about the Jaguar I-Pace. We like its styling, its performance and dynamics, its interior, and it has a decent range. We don't like the older car's poor infotainment system. It has a much slower charging rate than the Kia, and obviously its warranty is not as comprehensive as the Kia's new car warranty. I can't really tell you how long I have waited for this test, because these are two of my favourite electric cars. In fact, it's two of my favourite cars that are currently on sale today. But which one would we choose? Well, the Jaguar I-Pace is a car that came out and it challenged the establishment. It challenged what people thought of the Jaguar brand. It thrust it right into the future. It made people rethink of how they saw Jaguar. No longer was it this kind of stuffy old man's club on wheels, smelling of stale cigar smoke and whiskey, and it was tech, it was modern, it was bright, it showed a real clear future for Jaguar, which by 2025 is going all electric. And you could almost lay those exact same plaudits across the EV6, because that's exactly what it's doing. It's challenging people's perception of Kia, and that's what it's meant to do. No longer can it be seen as this humdrum budget brand, but it's now there, challenging the establishment, going right up against, and in some cases, beating, soundly thrashing the likes of Audi, Volkswagen, and some more German premium brands. But which one would we actually choose? Well, I'm going to give the narrowest of victories to the I-Pace. It still is the car that I would reach for the keys for to go for a drive in. I love the way it does everything. I love the way it looks, I love the way it drives, I love the performance, and I do love the Jaguar brand, there's no doubt about it. And up until Porsche launching the Taycan Cross Turismo, I always said it was my money no object EV of choice. However, if the comfort of that new car warranty is too much to overcome, the charging capabilities being much better, and the practicalities maybe eking into it a little bit more in terms of the cabin, then I wouldn't blame you in the slightest if you went down the route of the Kia. It is an absolutely sensational car, and if you haven't driven one, you really need to go and have a drive in one, because this really will blow your socks off. But think about this for a second as we end now. We've just pit a Kia against a Jaguar. And would you have said that even as close as 10 years ago was even thinkable? Thank you for watching another edition of AutoEV. As always, please make sure that you've subscribed to the channel and press the little bell button down below, because that way you're then notified of when our next video will go live. And if you like what we do, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Leave us some comments, good or bad. What do you think? Were we right to choose the Jaguar? Would you have gone for the Kia? Let us know. Also remember, we're on all social media platforms as well, so Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram and Twitter, so go and give us a follow there, because every little bit helps us. And if this has just whetted your appetite for even more, then make sure you stick on our AutoEV YouTube channel, where you'll find a dearth of road test reviews, classic icons and twin tests available for your viewing pleasure. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for watching AutoEV and for your continued support. I'll see you again soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe, and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.